Hi, in this Synth Secrets, we're going to use Ableton Live's Wavetable to show you how to create morphing arpeggios. We've used Floating Points Argente as inspiration. This track is a beautiful piece of music from a top producer that prominently features an arpeggiated synth morphing so slowly over the course of 5 minutes and it's almost imperceptible at times. We've dropped a link to the original tune below, but for now, here's a quick taste of what we're creating today. And here it is in the context of a tune. Before we start, some basic housekeeping. Please note the MIDI part, as the arrangement is critical to the sound that we're going for. It's covering about 3 octaves of territory. Our MIDI part starts on F0, which is at 93 Hz, and sweeps all the way up to B3, which sits squarely at 246 Hz. Starting with such a wide note palette allows us to move up and down the frequency spectrum simply by manipulating the frequency cutoff knob to dramatic effect. If you wish to follow along, there's a download link to the full Ableton session below. And one last intro thingy, please remember to subscribe and hit the notification button. We appreciate the support. Right, let's get to it. First, let's set the project tempo to 175 BPM. Next, add an instance of Wavetable. Keeping in the basic shapes category, select the sawtooth wave. Next, move over to the amplitude envelope on the right and bring the sustain down to nothing. You can leave everything else as is, as we want a pluck or a percussive strike sound. I know that to make this part really interesting, I need to change a variety of characteristics of the sound over time. To do that, I'll create an instrument rack containing this instance of Wavetable by selecting it and hitting Command G. Now we're able to create some macros. Don't forget to pump up the output gain from -9 decibels to 0 decibels, so we have plenty of output and as a result, plenty of flexibility during the arranging and mixing process. It's just no fun to have a patch that's too quiet, even when you've got your faders slammed to the max. Here's our progress so far. We want a sound that's fun to play and very approachable. Probably the easiest way to dial in the fun is to play with the filter cutoff. There's a reason it's the biggest knob on the interface. To begin with, I'm going to turn the cutoff to 0 and hit play. If you do the same, you'll hear that it's not a particularly useful sound in its current state. So open the mod matrix and enter a value of 50 at the intersection between filter 1 frequency and envelope 2. Now we're getting somewhere. Next, let's start doing some of these macros. Click on the button at the top left of the instrument rack interface to show the macro controls. Then click Map on the very top of the instrument rack interface. Click on the Filter 1 cutoff knob, then click on Map underneath the first macro knob. Click on the green Map button again to exit map mode and play around with your newly programmed macro knob. On my project, I'll automate knob 1 to open up the filter over time. Here's our progress so far. Now that we've mapped our first macro, let's repeat the process, but this time we'll do something a bit more complex, so we can morph from a percussive strike into something a bit more like a bowed string. Map the amplitude envelope decay, labelled D on the bottom of the amp envelope pane, to knob 2, setting the minimum to 200 and the max to 2 seconds. Now also map the amp envelope's attack to that same knob, and in the macro mappings menu on the left, keep the minimum at 0 and set max to 105. Finally, map the release to that same knob, set the minimum to 200 and the max to 500. Select knob 2 and hit Command R to rename it, and call it Strike Bow. I'll automate my rack to morph from strike to bow as the filter opens up. Here's our progress so far. I feel like I'm going to want a higher octave layer that adds complexity and sparkle as the filter opens. Activate Oscillator 2. Select the OB6 shapes wavetable in the vintage category. Pitch it up 12 semitones, then fiddle with the wavetable position until you're in an area you like the sound of. I like a wavetable position of about 50% on this one. Now click on the matrix in the modulation section to open the mod matrix. Next, click on the intersection of envelope 3 and oscillator 2 position and enter a value of 50. Then click on the blue text envelope 3 to open that envelope's edit window. Turn sustain to 0 and decay to about 2 seconds. That gives just a little tonal change at the front edge of each note to keep it interesting. Now I don't want to have oscillator 2 active the whole time. Bringing out that sparkle layer is something you can do over time to keep an arrangement moving. I'll map oscillator 2's gain to our third macro knob and automate to come in and out so you can hear what that does. Here's our progress so far. I feel like modulating the tuning of oscillator 2 would be a fun trick. Coming in and out of tune would allow the patch to go from feeling wide and pulsating to crisp and hyper-focused. I'll map oscillator 2's det or detune value to macro knob 4 and automate so that we can get a taste of its effect. Here's our progress so far. For our final step, we're just going to soften it up ever so slightly. Load up a hybrid reverb into your instrument rack. Change the algorithm to shimmer and then reduce the dry wet to around 20%. Reverb before effects? Well, do what sounds good and please do leave your own suggestions in the comments below. Next, add in a delay and again make sure it's within the rack so we can map it to the macros. For both of these effects, subtlety is key. Firstly, let's automate the dry wet from around 20% to 50%. Then map the filter frequency to macro 5 and also the filter width to the same macro. Open the macro settings window and for the filter width set 3.29 as the minimum and 3.75 for the max. For the filter frequency set 2.61 for the minimum and 18 for the max. We'll then automate macro 5. Now the dry wet is increasing, but also the filter frequency and the filter width. Here's our final sound. And here it is in the context of a tune. If you like this Synth Secrets, please drop a comment below of any suggestions of tracks you'd like us to try recreate, or for use as inspiration for a particular sound. Thanks for watching and see you next time.